Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
This is kinda long and not incredibly scary, but here's a weird experience I had while working as a camp counselor in Minnesota. Me, 17. I work at a summer camp in Minnesota. The place is about 4 hours north of the Twin Cities. North Woods, lots of lakes and not a ton of people. Second year as a counselor. It's a sleepaway camp, so you get like a cabin of 8 to 10 kids for a week with one other counselor helping you. Camp is about 15 minutes down a dirt from the nearest town. My third week into my 7-week stint, things are going well. Just a few shitty kids I've had to deal with, but nothing special. Co-counselors have been fine too, since everyone is pretty close. It's a YMCA camp. Praise Jesus.jpg. Start of third week and I get my new co for the week. French dude named Pascal. Like 15 to 20 Frenchies work at the Camp BC of some YMCA exchange program. Most of them are pretty normal. Pascal is chill, but English is a little iffy. Start our week with no issues, but campers are ages 10 to 12, which is basically the worst to deal with. Dick jokes, cursing, preteen rebellion and body odor, etc. Surprisingly not that bad. They like us, so everything is fine from Sunday, when they arrive, till Wednesday. On Wednesday we do our overnight. Basically wear our cabin, packs tents and food, and goes camping for one night at a campsite of our choosing that's about 1 to 4 miles from the main camp. I've done it many times, so not really an issue, especially with an older age group. Counselors chose the campsite, so I picked this one named Lone Pine. Never been to it, about a 3.7-mile hike from the main camp. Run it by Pascal. Him and the campers don't give a fuck. Excited to go out and fish and make fires and shit. We head out right after lunch. Counselors wear these big-ass bags called doulaf packs that have our tents and food. Hike there takes a while, but it's really pretty and nice weather. Get to the site, on a small lake. There's so many in this area of Minnesota that if there's no houses on it, it probably doesn't have a name. Average size site, but super dense trees around it. Like at least twice as dense as most of the forest in this area. Since I'm a dumbfuck, I think this means more firewood instead of being sus. Set up tents, make fire, pretty average night so far. Catch fish and cook dinner, tell ghost stories, swim in the lake, cheesy summer camp shit. Kids get in their tents at about 10. Pascal has a watch and we have a walkie-talkie for emergencies, but that's it for electronics. Pascal and I talk till about 12, girls in France and Minnesota shit. Head to our tent and sleep. At like 2 a.m. we wake up to a distant tornado siren. Sounds like a stereotypical air raid noise. If you grew up on the plains, you know how eerie this shit is. I lived in southern Minnesota. Tornadoes were pretty common in the summer there. Not up in the North Woods though. In my 8 years of going to camp, I only heard of a tornado warning once, let alone a full alarm. I also didn't think we were close enough to the town to hear it. I also didn't know they even had one. Either way, Pascal is freaked out because there are no tornadoes in Paris. Some kids understand, others don't. We all get our stuff but leave the tents because I don't want to be out here wasting time if this tornado comes. It's also dark. Like way too dark. Everyone grabs clothes and a flashlight, gets in single file and follow the trail out of the site. Super ominous with no animal noises whatsoever and these distant sirens and whipping wind being the only thing we hear. Kinda hustling. One kid trips and falls, skins knee. Realize we forgot the first aid pack. I want to keep going but kid turned on bitch mode. Pascal says he can run back to get it since we're only 5 minutes out. 15 minutes pass, Pascal comes running back with the first aid and a terrified look. Still freaks me out to this day. Dude is fucking white as shit and tosses me the pack and starts speed walking out of here. The kid barely has time to bandage knee. I'm weirded out. The wind sounds odd too. Like you know when an old tree sways in the wind. That groan, but all around us. No moon, no stars, just this groan and that fucking siren. I can't believe I didn't notice anything off in the moment. As we keep walking out, I get the walkie-talkie and radio and that our group is coming back to camp. Silence for a minute. Wind gets creepier and some kids say they hear footsteps in the woods. Others think they're joking and say to fuck off. I'm still trying to radio in and Pascal is 15 feet in front of the group, still not fucking talking. Shit is hitting the fan.jpg. Eventually my camp director responds.
Anon, what is going on?
Just get me a van to the entrance to Lone Pine site of SAP. Camp has a van for shit kinda like this. I'm panicking. The director can hear, so he just goes.
Okay, it'll be there soon.
Should have mentioned the tornado sirens. They get louder, but we are walking in the opposite direction of the town. Those damn sirens. We get to the entrance of the trail. More and more kids mention footsteps. I think I heard them too, but it's hard to tell with the sirens and wind. I'm still wondering why it's so dark. Spend a lot of time out in the woods out here, but this is different. I radio in and ask where the van is. 5 minutes out. Kids are crying. Pascal is sitting in the road silent, and my radio suddenly goes pure static. I'm freaking the fuck out. Groans of trees continue, and now this one kid said he saw a person running in the woods. I scream at him to shut up. I'm losing it. Van finally comes. We all run inside screaming, and some kids say people are running around the van. Driver is my friend, sees my eyes and knows he has to fucking floor it back to camp. We get back, but the camp is empty. When there was a tornado drill, everyone goes to the bathrooms underneath the lodge. BC, it's safe. We ran there, ignoring the driver. The counselor steps out in a towel. I just showered. The whole camp isn't there. WTF. The camp director heard the noises we were making. Runs out of the lodge. Tells me to calm the fuck down. Takes my kids inside, staff calms them down. Notices Pascal, takes him inside too. A few more counselors come, and they talk to me outside. Tell them about the tornado. There is no tornado, they say. System failure, MP3. Asks me what site I was at. Say Lone Pine. One counselor whistles. Like that damn you fucked up whistle. The director frowns at me. Tells me I wasn't supposed to go out there. Closed it down for maintenance over the summer. Well, I didn't know that. Tells me we'll sort it out tomorrow. Get some sleep. We all sleep in the lodge because we're scared. The next morning some parents come to pick their kids up. Lucky bastards. Pascal isn't okay though. He still won't talk. Only in rapid French to the other Frenchies. They seem spooked. Pascal goes home basically, gets an early flight home, gets driven into the cities that day and never comes back to camp. Frenchies won't tell me what he saw. Only Amber. I thought that was Spanish for a friend. No help. Anyways, the camp director drove me out to the site that day to pick up the tents. Tell her what happened. She nods, believes me clearly, but won't elaborate.
We are staying out of this area now. Sorry I didn't tell you.
Get to the site. Tents are shredded. Looks like they lost a fight to Wolverine. The director doesn't look surprised. Tells me to clean up. Goes to the fire pit and dumps some shit in there and mutters a few words. I start to say something. She hushes me and finishes her little monologue. Some languages I can't understand. Latin or native, I don't really know. We walked out of there in silence. Footsteps. Towards the site. Opposite direction from us. I start to panic again. The director tells me to relax. Get to the van. Basically says don't fuck with this place or say anything to anyone. Won't give me any more info. But doubles my pay for the week. That makes it better. The rest of the summer was normal. Never came anywhere near Lone Pine site ever again. I still don't know what happened. So many things happened and I'm so confused. Know about Wendigos but don't seem like it. Sirens still freak me out, hear them in my dreams sometimes. Not as fucked as Pascal though, Elmo. Any insight to this would be appreciated.
I miss St. Paul and Minneapolis. Used to go crawling into every hole I'd find along the Mississippi. There are uncharted caves that the Mississippi runs off into, that I suspect go for miles. Under the Sioux Line Bridge north of Lake Street. There's a small spring coming out of the bottom of the bluff, but when the river is high, the river flows into it somewhat. It smells of methane and bubbles when the river is low, and water flows out of it then, south of Lake Street but before Minnehaha Falls. Around the park at 38th Street, there's a waterfall that goes down from the river surface level. My buddy lowered me down the bluff with a climbing harness over the mouth of the cave. And with a powerful LED light, I saw there was a considerable tunnel with a waterway heading downwards. You could easily go down there with a kayak, but you would never come out. Absolutely spooky. The amount of places to be explored along the Mississippi is amazing. I bet there are hundreds of unexplored caves caused by the soft limestone. Explains the mysterious explosions you may hear in the spring and summer.
Sadly, they tend to cement up any access point the state finds nowadays.
True. I wonder how many locations from this site have been walled off, even in the late 90s when most of the articles on the site were written. Many had been blocked off. I was in Fort Snelling Park, and I noticed a metal grate welded together covering a hole that went into the cliffside. It appeared people had chipped away at the limestone on the edge of the grate, allowing a skinny guy like me to slip in. There wasn't anything interesting, just a tunnel about 4 feet high that went maybe 30 to 50 feet into the cliff. A pipe lay at the end. I suspect it was a drain of some sort for the old fort. The tunnel was filled, and I mean filled with grasshoppers and spiders. Really wasn't worth it. I've been into the mud tunnels on Nicollet Island too, adjacent to Satan's Cave. Interestingly enough, the entrance is a manhole near the shoreline, surrounded by bushes. You go in, crawl through a muddy hole about the size of a microwave. Saw a corpse. Part of the tunnel collapsed on some homeless guy. You could see his feet sticking out of the rubble, along with a camp stove. Makes me wonder if there was an explosion. There's a brick wall in there. I have no idea where it came from or who built it. You can crawl under it, but according to some hillbilly and his 2 girlfriends that I met in the cave, that's where people like to piss. So you crawl over it instead. I don't know if it's an old foundation, but above it is just rock. I think they may have tried to wall off the deeper parts of the cave. There were rusty pipes sticking out of the ceilings. Lots of crawling. There were tunnels that went off to the side that only I was thin enough to slide into, knee-deep in water. I didn't want to explore further after a sharp drop-off that made me go waist-deep. I had no idea how deep the side tunnels got and didn't want to get trapped. Heard some old lady talking to her cat through a pipe in the wall.
Owned land by Forestville State Park, a park that started as a town in the 1800 seconds until a great fire killing many people. Me camping with bro on land. Night is coming, so rush to get firewood. I have been hearing strange sounds all night but think nothing of it. Start a fire, smoke a bowl, and talk about the coyotes across the river howling. About to go to bed when all of a sudden we both hear a large yelp noise and all coyote noises stop. Alright. WEBM. Go into the tent and start sleeping. I fall asleep rather quickly and so does my friend. Have weird dream of little old women wearing moss. Wake up to my friend screaming. I look over at him and see an old moss-covered hand gripping him, pulling him out of the tent. Start screaming and reach for my gun. Hand lets go and I chase after it. As soon as I get out of the tent I feel as if there are eyes all around me. Yell at friend it's time to cross the river and get into the car. We both run as fast as we can. Make it to the car that was facing our campsite and turn on the radio. Talk for a sec before looking at the then dead campfire across the river. It ain't dead no more. I see a couple figures around 4 feet talking, walking around the campfire. WTF, the fire goes up about 17 feet and I turn on the car lights. All of them are female creatures staring at me. Nope. Back up all the way down the Minmate Road in reverse and made it to a nearby camp group and spent the night. About to go to sleep, look up the hill and see a person-like thing 1 mile away. I said my prayer that night. I don't know what I saw, fuck, it could be method midgets for all I know. But shit, guys, never go camping without a buddy in that area.
I was a night concierge at a rural hotel in Minnesota from 1996 to 2001. I have a lot of stories from the 5 years that I worked there. I'll try and stay active in this thread, but I'm at work right now. 3 a.m., doing what I do usually, sitting behind the front desk trying not to fall asleep. Dozing off when I hear the front door open. Look up and see a large guy struggling to close the door against the wind and the snow. He's wearing a large, gray winter coat with a shanka. He walks up to the front desk and I get a better look at him. His face is covered with a balaclava and snow goggles. Hello, sir. Welcome to the hotel. Doesn't say anything. Just lays a stack of cash on the desk. Sir, I need a credit card and ID to give you a room. He doesn't say anything. He just lays another stack. Sir, I'm afraid I can't help you. Hear a click. His jacket is now wide open, revealing an arm pointing a small revolver at me. At this point, I just turn around and grab a key off the wall and give it to him. Enjoy your stay, sir. For some reason, my 20-something brain thinks to not call the cops until the morning. Small town, none of the cops would have been up. Get off my shift at 8 in the morning. Call cops. Once they arrive, we head to his room. I open the door for them. No one is in the room. The bed is made. TV is displaying static. Cops check security footage. No one ever left the room. In fact, the security footage never shows him arriving in a car. He just walks up to the hotel from the forest. Extremely strange, since the hotel was 20 miles from the nearest town. He didn't give me ID or credit card, so we couldn't find out who he was. Never found out who he was. Sorry if this story is a little short, I just chose the shortest one. A middle-aged man comes in with a younger female companion. She looks about 10 years his junior. He looks paranoid and anxious. He keeps looking around the lobby. The lady looked tired and sad. She didn't say anything. She just stared at the ground the whole time. He gives me a New York license as ID. Give him his room key. He forcibly grabs the woman and brings her along. The lady looks at me with a look of despair, as if she's asking for help. Think nothing of it. Around 5 in the morning, 3 hours until my shift is done. Hear someone walking towards the lobby. It's the man from earlier. He's dragging his suitcase behind him, very strange because he was carrying it when he first came in with relative ease. Don't think anything of it. He gives me back the room key, and I give him his credit card and ID. Did you enjoy your stay, sir? Mumbles something. Leaves. See him loading the suitcase into the trunk of his car and driving off into the night. Wonder where the woman he was with went. I thought she was a hooker and left from a different exit once the deed was done. Go and check the room. Usual evidence of people staying in the room. Nothing out of the ordinary. The only weird thing was that the bathtub had a reddish-brown ring around the top. Looked like someone had been trying to clean it off. Call caretakers to the room to clean it up.
Hi there, X. Not sure if this is actually paranormal, but in retrospect, some of the events just don't quite match up. So here is my story. The Anon, staying at Camp Tomahawk, Long Lake, Minnesota, around 2 years ago. Having a great deal of fun with my scout troop, spending my days in the wilderness. Learning shit, eating stuff. All that. During this, I am taking the Astronomy Merit Badge. One of the requirements of this merit badge is that you stay up and watch the stars late at night. Bit of background, Camp Tomahawk has a tradition wherein everyone who is doing that merit badge does that one night together. In an event known as Star Party on Wednesday nights. Me and about 8 others in my troop are taking astronomy. One of these 8 is my best friend Russell, who I have known for around 12 years at that point. Wednesday arrives, day passes, I experience nothing unusual, yet. At camp, friend and I are hanging out by the fire, doing the absolute coefficient of fuck plus all. This lasts until after dinner, which BTW was steak and potatoes. At around 9 p.m., Russell, me, and the 7 others are all getting ready to take the long 1 1/4 mile trek up to the parade field, which is the second largest clearing in our section of the camp. We start walking down the road and up through a trail that goes through a portion of the woods. A shortcut that cuts all of 50 feet from our journey. Nothing appears out of the ordinary, except that it is a bit darker than it should be at 9 p.m. in July. I tell the others this and they just chalk it up to weather, or more specifically, a storm. For reference, the rest of the night and that week afterward, it was fucking perfect out. We arrived at the Star Party, and there were at least 150 people there. There's crazy shit everywhere, giant-ass Lincoln logs, fucking bags of slushy, and a row of lighters set to pulse to music. Fucking beautiful, man. Me and Russell sort of party around for a bit, even managed to score some weed off a counselor. As inexplicable as that sounds. We get slushies, and all that other stuff. Around 12:30, both of us are getting pretty tired. So we decided to head back to the camp, just the 2 of us. In the absolute pitch black of the forest. We walked maybe half the distance. It was fucking dark. It is at this point that I begin to hear a very faint buzzing. I tell Russell, who agrees that he can hear it as well. We keep walking toward the camp, and we get maybe 40 feet from the entrance to the shortcut. This whole time, the buzzing has steadily been increasing in volume, but never getting loud enough to really warrant a great deal of suspicion. Suddenly, the buzzing kicks up at least 80 decibels, to the point where it almost hurts my ears. My eyes, my mouth, my dobie are just covered in sandflies, mosquitoes. You name it. There had to have been hundreds more bugs than I had ever seen in one place. I'm talking like tens of millions of insects in a massive swarm that must have reached around 75 feet in the air. I start fucking dead out sprinting, unable to breathe, I can barely see. I can't hear anything but the buzzing of the swarm in my ears. I reach the start of the forest path and I try my damnedest not to trip as I run along it. The exact second that the camp and the light of the fire are in sight, the buzzing stops. And I don't mean quieted down, I mean dead silence. Even the bugs still on me fly back the way I came. I find Russell, who was around 10 feet behind me, and we scurry back to camp, where we find a couple of the adults sitting around the fire. We asked them if they'd seen or heard anything. They hadn't. The rest of the week was uneventful.
I live near a very strange area in northern Minnesota. The thing with this area is that it's remote. The area is around Floodwood, Minnesota. North on Highway 73 and west on Highway 2. We used to have a hunting shack north of Floodwood. We hunted there for 30 plus years until the couple that owned the land passed away. Truckers have seen some weird shit along Highway 2 west of Floodwood. Orbs and strange lights. My brother and I one day after hunting decided we would drive to our friend's parents' house, which was only a few miles away. We didn't have any electricity at the hunting shack, so evenings got a little boring. As we drove through the farm, we came to a stop at the highway and went north on Highway 73. As we were turning, two bright green orbs shot straight up in the air from the ditch in front of us. A few seconds later, I said to my brother, "Did you see that?" He replied, "Yes, I thought I was seeing things. Wasn't a reflection." What were they? I don't know. Another incident involving my grandma and grandpa a few miles down the road from where this took place was in the late 70s or early 80s. They were coming south down Highway 73 and turned down a dirt road, and right alongside their car was a fireball following the car until it shot out into a farm field. I remember my grandparents telling me this story. Next story. I wasn't there, but my brother and my dad and another guy, Jack, got done eating supper one evening during deer season, and the entire western side of the forest was lit in green light glowing through the trees. I mean, there is nothing but spruce swamp for miles in that direction. The Department of Natural Resources even released wolves via helicopter in that area because of how remote it is. I don't know, but this is a strange area with a lot of other stories.
I saw a canine's phantom once. I used to live on a reservation in Minnesota. So think woods, dogs, meth, sovereign citizens. My usual night hobby used to be lurking DIY and out at night on a dock because that was the only place I could get reception. One night, there was this wicked storm, which meant the dock was off limits. So instead, I went out to the garage, opened the car door, set up a lawn chair and tried to see if I could get any service. I could not. Staring at the storm, I became enamored. I turned off all the lights in the garage and resumed my position sitting on the chair so I could observe the storm. Now, in this particular neighborhood, there were about 4 houses total with an acre assigned to each house and a heavy wood surrounding the whole thing. It was about 4 miles to any other people. Also, in this neighborhood, people tended to let their dogs run wild, except during storms, and I was on a play basis with every dog in the area. So it came as a surprise when a huge bolt of lightning divided the sky, illuminating what seemed to be a very small German shepherd trotting towards me. This dog that I did not recognize walked right past me into my garage, using my phone as a light. I turned around and noticed the fucking thing disappeared. I tore the garage up looking for this fucking dog. Before this, I've always doubted souls or spirits or whatever. Now that I've seen it, I have a hard time understanding the fear aspect. I mean, it was just a little dog. I wanted to maybe dry him off and have a storm companion.
This happened when I lived in Bemidji, the asshole of Minnesota. I was about 22, and it was the middle of December. My girlfriend called me up and asked me to come over. Without much thought, I jumped in my car, ready to speed off to her. I hadn't realized that a serious snowstorm had kicked up. I got about half a mile down my backwoods road before I called her up to say the roads were way too slippery for an evening encounter. We chatted as I drove back to my house, and kept talking even after I parked in the driveway. It was weird. As I sat there, in the driver's seat, I kept thinking I saw something shift on my periphery, like something shifting in the passenger's side, back seat. We sat and spoke for several minutes. No matter how much I tried to laugh it off, I kept jumping at something at the edge of my vision. The last time I looked, the dark shadow didn't fade away. It looked like a small person sitting, curled, in the space between the passenger seat and the back seat. It lifted itself upright and extended an arm and hand with too many knuckles directly at my face. I screamed into my phone and slammed the overhead lights, only to see a dirty passenger side floor.
Used to live in Wayzata, Minnesota. Lived adjacent to a 30 or more mile long trail called the Luce line. One night I was up late. I was sitting in my room. Basement room with windows at ground level. Shittiest house on the block. Would see strange lights that fly through the air. Fairies or something. It's 4 a.m. and I'm awake. Get a very weird feeling that there is something outside of my window peering in my room. Hear the door creak open. Door was outside of my bedroom door in the basement. Hear breathing outside of my window. Flipped on the lights, opened the shades because fuck you. I will find you. Hear steps outside. Walk outside of my room and turn on the lights and lock the door and shut it. Weird footsteps the size of children outside. Was mushy out on the ground, but the steps disappeared. Next night, turn off the lights and fall asleep. Have a dream that there is a black pointy object flying through the backyard. Try to follow it, but my body is limp. Also see in my dream that there is a group of white bald creatures all around my bed. Wake up partially and can see a large reptile-like creature dressed sort of like the creatures that wanted the ring in the Lord of the Rings, screaming with an open jaw and dead eyes at me. Wake up sweating with the sensation that someone was sitting on my chest. Weeks or months later, have a dream that I come out of my body and sit up, then stand up and look down at my body. Everything is purple, like I am wearing dark purple Halloween sunglasses. Walk out of my bedroom and upstairs and face east. In the dream I look out of the window, see a purple light rise up from the horizon. It is beautiful. I black out and wake up. Exactly 100 days later, according to journal. It's late, get this urge to walk outside and down the road in my neighborhood, and then back down to my house. Get to the foot of my driveway. Look up. A strange purpley LED looking like the size of a dime. If you held a dime above you, silently floats through the trees and down to the horizon. It stops on the horizon. Another object appears out of nowhere and then stops next to what I saw. Then both lights fade out. After this dream, I post what I saw on Mutual UFO Network. Actual investigator comes out to my house. Old guy in his 50s or 60s, bald and skinny. Records what I say and takes readings of what I saw and the altitude, how many degrees above the horizon, and etc. Walk around the property, asking me questions. Tells me of a location somewhere a bit away from where I was in Otter that there are meetings for people like me. Says that they checked all the flight records and so no known flights in the area at the time or reports of meteorological activity that may explain what I saw.
I've told these stories here a few times before. Live in Minnesota. I love spending time outdoors, doing a lot of hiking and camping in state forests. Also love shooting, do a lot of shooting in state forests since it's legal and free to shoot there. The Department of Natural Resources only asks that you don't shoot anything that would leave a mess, paper targets only. Marine Buddy is coming back from a 13-month deployment in a stand, so we plan a big outing. Decide to go to Solana State Forest, which is balls deep in pine country. The drive up is picturesque, thick, beautiful pine forest all around, a few clusters of birch trees mixed in which make for a really beautiful contrast of the tree line. We decided to stop at the Department of Natural Resources station and let them know in advance where we'll be shooting so nobody gets spooked by the gunshots. The Department of Natural Resources station is empty, no vehicles in the dirt parking lot, doors all locked. No lights on. Figure they must be out doing ranger stuff. No big deal. I also noticed that there was no traffic on the way up as soon as we entered the area. All other traffic got off the highway. That's not too weird in itself. You wouldn't really expect many people to be passing through such a sparsely populated area. Get off the road and into the forest itself. Set up in a decent area and have a great time hiking around and shooting for a few hours. Pack up our gear and head back. Running a little low on gas, so my buddy decides to look for a station, but there are virtually none on this entire strip of road for miles. The only gas station in the area is a combination bar and grill with a gas station beside it, which is pretty secluded. Pull in and try to get gas. Pumps are done. The gas station is empty despite the parking lot being full of cars. We both give each other a look like the fuck is up with this place. We go to the door of the bar and grill to see if the gas station attendant is in there on the off chance he was skipping out on work due to a lack of business. The door is locked. I knock on the door while my buddy lights up a smoke. Someone opens. I don't remember if the person who opened the door actually said anything or not because I was scared shitless. The building is packed with people. I can see about 40 people from where I'm standing inside this place. People aren't eating or drinking. Every single one of them is standing up. Every single one of them is staring directly at us. Their eyes are wide, brows furrowed. They look absolutely furious. Nobody says a word. Nothing but sheer anger in the face of every single fucking person in there. Buddy and I both take a couple steps back slowly, then run back to his truck. Peel on out of the parking lot like there's no tomorrow and drive without looking back. Buddy asks if I got any ammo left in my gun. I say yeah and ask him the same thing. He says yeah, then we both go silent for about 40 minutes. That was pretty weird. This was about 2 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. No idea why apparently the entire town would be in this building at that time, or why they were so angry. There was no music playing, there was no TV on. I didn't realize at first due to the shock of the situation, but there were no booths or tables inside the building either. We've actually gone back to Solana State Forest a few times, and every time we drive by this place. The little gas station is always apparently closed, and there are always cars parked all around the bar and grill. Even at 1 a.m. Weird place. Camping and hiking around Mille Lacs for 3 days with 2 buddies of mine. It's the end of summer and starting to cool down, so there are no mosquitoes around, and it gets chilly enough at night to warrant heavy clothing. Pretty uneventful and normal camp for the first day and a half, aside from being attacked by a little barn owl. Halfway through the second day, we're hiking balls deep into some little trails, what must be game trails. Come across a clearing. Knee-high grass, maybe a square mile of it surrounded by thick pine trees and undergrowth. Would have been completely surreal if it weren't for the grass being loaded with ticks. Randomly see something emerge from the tree line. Everyone does a double take. It's a white-tailed deer walking on its hind legs. We all burst out laughing because this thing just looks idiotic. It's not unusual for deer to buck up on their hind legs and take a few steps. But this thing was walking on its hind legs, front legs are folded up close to its body almost like a T-Rex. And its head is back with mouth agape, tongue flailing. We bust a gut laughing for a good 5 minutes, till we see another deer do the exact same thing. At this point we can barely breathe because it appears that all deer in this particular part of Minnesota are violently dumb. The 2 deer amble their way over to each other and stand at what would be face to face if it weren't for the fact that they were looking straight up into the sky. This is apparently the funniest thing any of us has ever seen. Exhaustion probably played a big part in why we found it so funny. We stand around watching these 2 deer to see just how much entertainment they'll provide, but after maybe 30 seconds of face to face they fall down to all fours and walk away in different directions like normal deer. We wipe the tears from our eyes and make our way back to our camp after eating lunch in the clearing. Get back to our camp at around 4 p.m. and start gathering enough wood to cook food and keep the fire going into the night. Pass around a bottle of Canadian Club and recant the time we encountered 2 stupid deer. It's a fond memory. Hit the hay and sleep sound through the night. Wake up to find that friend number 1 has been up for hours. Has a pretty odd look on his face. The first words out of his mouth were, "A deer pooped a human poop on my stuff." Lol, what? Says he heard rustling leaves and twigs that sounded like more than just a breeze, so he opened his tent to check. Says he saw a whitetail rooting around the camp, and it took a shit on his backpack. But it wasn't normal deer pellets, it was a big log of shit. Bust out laughing at his very somber retelling of events, because his stuff got pooped on. Joke all day about our buddy poop pack and the dumb deer getting their revenge. We all move on with our lives and backtrack to our first campsite where we'll be staying the night before we leave in the morning. The third night, friends number 1 and number 2 are awoken before sunrise by something rustling around the camp. Their whispering back and forth wakes me up. I open my tent and peek my head out to see what's up. See a buck and a doe meandering about maybe 10 yards away from us. Contemplate shouting to scare them off, but don't want to risk pissing off a buck while I'm laying down in a compromising position. All we glance at each other and just observe the curious mammals as they go about their business. One smells around the campfire a bit, finds our bottle of Canadian Club. It rears up on its hind legs. It shits in the general area of the bottle. The buck also stands upright, hops around in a circle, sprays piss fucking everywhere, tongue flapping in the wind. Can't hold back my laughter at the sight. The deer get spooked and run off while still standing up. Laugh at the humorous yet odd sight and tell friend number 1 that he's going to clean the shit off the whiskey when the sun comes up. Tells me to fuck myself. I crawl back in my tent and sleep for a few more hours. We all get up about the same time and stumble out of the tents to examine the extent of the damage. Once again, the scat left by the deer is absolutely nothing like deer droppings. It's a big gnarly human-like shit. I can't do anything but laugh at the whole situation. Fucking weird deer around these parts. Can't help but wonder what the fuck was going on there. Just weird animals, or something else. Skinwalkers playing at being deer and playing a prank on some humans.
I live in Brainerd, Minnesota. Last fall, before it started getting really cold. A friend invited me to go camping in some forest up north. I'm no outdoorsman, but I agree. It's a long trek up there. Get some food in Duluth and then leave civilization behind. We set up camp. It's a really beautiful place. Remote, next to a lake. We set up camp and spent a few hours dicking around. At one point, we laugh our asses off like assholes over a dumbass joke. Buddy asks me to head out and get some more firewood while he gets dinner ready. I head out. It's a really beautiful spot. So I walk out for a bit just exploring before I bother getting any wood. Think I hear something. Brush moving, twigs snapping. Smells like hot, rancid garbage all of a sudden. I figure it's a skunk or a dead animal and hurry up to get branches and shit. I suddenly hear what sounds like a man getting strangled in the middle of a laughing fit. Fuck this. JPG. Spin around on my heel. Start running back towards camp. Ram face first into something. It's a head taller than me. And pale as shit. Too shocked to make out any details. Reach to my side, pull out my trusty fillet knife, and let loose 6 feet 4 worth of fear-powered, blue-collar stabbing into this thing. Can't remember what happened past this point, just spotty memories. I remember walking back to camp vaguely. I remember laughing my ass off over having dealt with that thing. Barely remember anything else. I know me and my buddy got out of Dodge that night instead of spending the night. By the time I gather my wits, we're on our way home. Texting and calling my friends and parents and shit. I was pumped about heading back home. Buddy drops me off. I remember he seemed really awkward. And left in a hurry, didn't even come in. Hole up in my apartment, spend hours just watching YouTube videos. Shit like that. Just wanted to hear people talking to get my mind off the trip. Call off work the next day. Don't even get any sleep. Watch a bunch of movies. Finally, I really check myself. All I've got is a big gash on my thigh. Already healing. I think I'm finally getting over it. I've been avoiding company for a few months. But that's not too unusual. Spending a lot more money on food, too. I used to eat a lot of rice and salads and shit. But I've been craving burgers and steaks and shit recently. I'm thinking about inviting some friends up north for a camping trip when the cold's over. I still feel like I have some unfinished business.
I used to do a lot of adventure fishing where I hike into remote rivers and lakes to fish relatively untapped waters. Getting busy with my job, I have not been able to do it much in the last few years, so when the chance came a few weeks ago, I had to take it. My friend that I usually go with bailed at the last minute, but I decided to make a go of it myself. I went out to a lake called Finstead Lake in the Boundary Waters area of northern Minnesota. It is a decent hike to get there off of a fairly crappy logging road, truly in the middle of nowhere. Anyhow, I got out there and fished the shit out of it with a float tube, kind of a one-man raft. I had heard from an old-timer that it had good smallers in there, and it did. I fished late and camped on a little rocky point on the north side. That night there were so many weird sounds coming from the woods that I could barely sleep. There was something big, moose, bear, I dunno, out crashing around in the woods. There were weird-ass screams from some animal. I was a little on edge about that when I heard music. It was classical music. I could not tell where it was coming from. It was faint, but it went on for over 2 hours. It was a mix of stuff. Sounded like maybe Minnesota Public Radio. Then it switched over to Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. There was someone out there. I could not see any fires other than mine. I put out my fire and packed my shit up and moved way back off of the lake to a little rise farther north. I just plopped down, rolled down and laid there. About an hour later, I heard motherfucking voices coming from the area where I had been camping. I freaked the fuck out and hunkered down. After a while they left, but I could not sleep. As soon as it got close to dawn, I was packed up. I went back down to the lake but did not see shit. I GTFO soon after. I cannot stress how far off the beaten path that I was.
The Minnesota Dogman is an alleged cryptid sighted in various Minnesota counties. It is similar to the Michigan Dogman and the Beast of Bray Road. It could very well be the same type of creature. Otter County. In one of the early months of 2009, a man reported seeing a dogman near Fergus Falls in Otter County. Here is how he described the encounter. I'll start off by saying that I have never believed in any of these sort of creatures. But I saw something in early 2009 that really disturbed me and is making me change my mind. I was not under the influence of any drugs. And I have better than average eyesight, and the lighting was nearing sunset, but I was still able to see clearly. So, I'll get this underway and explain my story, and maybe someone can shed some light on this for me. I live in Fergus Falls, Minnesota, which is in west central Minnesota, about an hour drive from Fargo, North Dakota. My mother-in-law lives out in the country, about 3 minutes 4 miles out of Fergus Falls, and I was staying there while my wife and her mother went shopping in town. They called me and asked if I wanted to go to a 7 p.m. movie. So, I left the house at about 6:30 p.m., 6:45 p.m. to meet them at the theater, about 2 miles from their house on a country road known as the Wendell Road. Along the Mistinker River, I saw 3 white-tailed deer. 2 of the deer were rather small, probably just yearlings, and a larger doe, who I assumed was their mother. Me being an avid hunter, lover of wildlife, and future wildlife biologist, stopped to look at the deer. I should also mention that I hunt in the area and have spent my whole life in the Fergus Falls area. The deer were following a small creek bed, which is in fact the Mistinker River, so there were hardly any trees except for one. Maybe because I didn't see it there, because of the tree, but I just noticed something crouching behind the tree on my side of the road, looking at the deer, and to my belief, hunting them. It just sat there, looking at the deer, taking no notice of me, even though I was in my truck, no more than 40 yards away, with a clear view, with nothing obstructing my view of it. It had one hand on the tree that it was bracing itself with. What struck me as shocking was the fact that it seemed to be a 2-legged creature, and not a 4-legged one. Its hands appeared to have opposable thumbs and were rather slender and long, very unlike a wolf. The creature looked as though if it stood upright, it would be over 7 feet tall, with a protruding muzzle, broad shoulders, a slender waist, thick, muscular thighs, and being as there was snow on the ground, I couldn't see the feet. He was deep, dark brown in color throughout the body. After several seconds of looking at the creature in shock, the deer ran off. Then, something amazing happened. It looked right at me, as though blaming me for losing his meal. He just sat there, looking at me and blinking, but not moving. This scared the crap out of me, so I hit the gas pedal and drove off. It was very dark after the movie, so I didn't much feel like trudging through the 3.5 feet of snow, with the possibility of a monster lurking in the area, who is currently looking for a meal that I scared off. So, at about 10 a.m., I went back there and walked down to the tree. Under the tree, there was no snow, so there were no tracks that I could see. But leading up to the tree, there were 3 tracks leading in from my grandmother-in-law's field, which was hard, black dirt. And if you know what a Minnesota field looks like in late winter, early spring, you can't make anything out of the dirt. The tracks I did find were only about 6 to 7 inches in length, but were clearly K9 prints, with the exception of 4 toe-looking marks in the snow.
St. Louis County. The second story is from another unnamed man. He saw the creature in early September in the year 1999 on an Air Force base in St. Louis County. He said that it looked like a Dogman. Here is the email he sent to a Dogman encounter site. First off, I would like to keep my name confidential, just for the fact that this happened on an Air Force base and I don't know who reads this stuff. This happened sometime in September of '99. I forget the exact date. It was early in the month though. It was between 2 and 3 a.m. I was a security forces airman, working 3rd shift, on base patrol. Now mind you, this is an Air National Guard base that I worked at, full-time. It's on the north side of Duluth, Minnesota, next to the International Airport. North to northeast is nothing but large wooded areas. Forest areas. 3rd shift on the base was pretty boring, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. and us full-timers worked a skeleton crew. Usually only 5 to 6 of us, on the 3rd shift. I was in the patrol truck, doing my usual rounds, checking doors and fence lines. Late at night, on the north side of the base was usually creepy enough when patrolling by yourself. Anyways, I was on this road, driving towards our baseball field, when my headlights caught a pair of eyes reflecting back at me. They were almost eye level with me, and I was sitting in an F-150. Around this time, a few of the guys had been seeing this huge buck around the property, like a 16-pointer or something around that size. I was about 80 yards or so when I saw these eyes reflecting back at me. So, I'm thinking it was a big deer. I gotta see this thing, so I hit the gas and started speeding towards the field. This is where it all happened so fast. It's almost hard to explain. There was a little slope behind the baseball field. It sloped down, probably about 12 to 15 feet, into a brush line. The brush went about 30 feet, then turned into a thick tree line. The brush was probably armpit high to me and pretty tough to traverse through, being so thick. As I turned into the baseball field and turned the truck towards the thing, I just caught the rear end of the thing leaping down the slope, below the line of sight of my headlights. The thing was no more than about 20 feet ahead of me when it leaped. All I got a look at was the back end of the thing, and it was big. The best I can do to describe it is to say that it was wolf, dog-like in nature. It had a long tail, longer than 2 feet. The hind legs looked exactly like that of a dog's, same with the back paws, but the paws were huge. They were bigger than my hands, for sure. The fur was wavy, yet matted and thick. The color was blondish or very light brown. I didn't notice any gray in it, but this all happened within about 2-3 seconds. I sat in my patrol truck for a couple of seconds, confused and thinking, I know what I saw, but it couldn't have been what I saw, so I hopped out, with my flashlight and M16 rifle, and walked to the edge of the slope. All I heard was the thing running through the woods in front of me, heading in a northwest direction. And this thing sounded like a moose charging through the trees. It made a lot of noise. That's when I started to get really scared, thinking, if this is some sort of wolf or whatever it could be, my M16 isn't going to do a thing to this animal. So I jumped back into my patrol truck as fast as I could and headed back to the SF headquarters. I never told any of the other members about this, for fear of ridicule or being called crazy. There is no way I misidentified this thing. I'm a trained observer, an avid hunter, and have worked with animal rehabilitation, with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, in the past. I know my animals in the Northwoods extremely well. I saw exactly what I saw. And that was the back end of a large wolf, dog thing, that basically had its eyes level with mine, while I was in a patrol truck. The back end was definitely much larger than any of the largest deer or black bears I've seen. The points I remember the clearest were the tail and back paws, as well as the texture and color of the fur. This is my story. I have never told it to anyone, in fear of ridicule. I swear it to be the truth. Anonymous. Early September of 1999. 2:30 a.m.
Todd County. Lastly, the third story is from another unnamed man. It was reported in the city of Long Prairie in the center of Todd County. This is how the encounter went. I was visiting my grandmother up in Long Prairie, Minnesota. I was spending a week with her, mostly just to help her with whatever she needed help with. It was summer and early one morning before the sun was even up. I went outside to tend the garden and maybe even get some squirrels for some squirrel dumplings for dinner, so I slung my semi-automatic assault rifle over my shoulder and headed out. I had just gotten about 20 squirrels. My grandmother's place has a lot of squirrels. When all of a sudden I picked up my last squirrel, and there I saw something, just on the edge of the woods behind my grandma's property. I saw some humanoid dog thing. It never attacked me. It just sat there, so I fired a couple shots at the creature. It yelped and ran off into the woods. I then went into the house and proceeded to call the local police department. They never found proof of what I saw other than a few paw prints, so they claimed I just shot at a wolf. My grandmother was worried and confused by the events taking place, so at dinner she sat me down and asked me about what I saw. I told her the whole story. Strangely enough, she seemed to believe me. I showed her where I saw the thing and where I was when it happened, etc. I never saw it again, but I've otherwise gotten over the whole ordeal.
Nicollet Island is a spooky little island on the Mississippi in downtown Minneapolis. It used to be a holy site for indigenous peoples, a place to meet as friends between tribes, a place for birth, ceremony, and important oral traditions. It had no bridges back then, and all visitors had to swim or travel to it by canoe. However, Western settlers arrived in the early 1800s and pushed the natives out. And it is said vengeful and stubborn spirits of the natives haunt the island and its caves, which are largely unknown to the public. I myself have ventured into these caves, which are quite off-putting. A small, quaint Victorian-era neighborhood of less than 100 now occupies the island, with a riverfront park overlooking the steel spires of downtown. Before the St. Anthony Dam was built south of the island, a long series of rapids coursed through the river valley down to where the Minnehaha Falls are now. At the southern edge of the Twin Cities, the dam provided hydroelectric power and allowed the river to be calm enough for commerce on barges and steamboats. In the late 1860s, it was home to dozens of mills perched on its rocky cliffs, connected to the other side of the river by a tunnel cut underneath the soft limestone. 5 years after the construction of the tunnel, it quite spontaneously collapsed, causing a landslide and inspiring a massive volunteer effort to dam the river before St. Anthony Falls failed. Over 1,000 participants worked night and day in an attempt to fix the dam. But the river off swept any reinforcements away before they could be secured, and heavy flooding the next year threatened destruction of much riverfront property and business downriver. Eventually, a curtain was built and redundancies were made in the dam. Only a decade later, a massive fire broke out from Nicollet Island and spread to downtown Minneapolis across the river, and is considered the worst fire in the history of the region, claiming almost 100 lives. During the Great Depression, the island turned into a slum and urban ruin, well until the conclusion of World War II. In the late 50s and early 60s, redevelopment began in the region. Old steam tunnels from the milling industry growth were reused and cut through an old cave thought to be carved by hand by Native Americans. The cave now is heavily worn by trespassers and explorers, vandalized with carvings in the soft stone. The cave has several entrances and tunnels crossing through it. One entrance can be found underneath the Grain Belt beer sign, through a decayed concrete slab and down a manhole, where one can crawl through tight mud tunnels into a series of caves. The foundations of old mills can be found in the clay-like earth the tunnels go through, and you must crawl through holes in thick brick walls or crawl over and under foundations before you come to relatively open spaces in great rifts between limestone sheets. Rusted pipes run to and fro, often barring your path. An old coal tunnel used to run from the riverfront into the basement of an old mill that had been raised over, but the inside had collapsed and exploration became impossible. Satanic rituals are said to occur in the caves here, although those who perform them stay in the drier limestone caves than the messy clay tunnels. These two are crossed with steam tunnels and are accessible by manholes, many of which are well watched and difficult to slip into. Rumor has it a welded manhole runs straight from the satanic cult cave into the Catholic girls' school, and sacrifices were made. There too are tales of human remains unearthing themselves from the clay tunnels, but it is unknown if they're from native burials or explorers having gotten crushed by the soft earth, which is known to occasionally shift. I've seen the booted feet of presumably a homeless person or a wayward traveler sticking out of the mud. A crushed camp stove sticking out between them, maybe quietly heating a can of beans when the tunnel suddenly gave way and took the life of the poor soul. In one of the long open rooms, which were spaces between limestone sheets, there are several clay tunnels which snake down into the ground and become thick with mud. They're extremely thin and slippery, and I was the only person out of the group small enough to explore them. So I traversed several in hopes of discovering other chambers. They would often only run 40 to 60 feet before coming to a halt or the water becoming too deep to continue safely. In the last and largest one, I counted 300 steps before I became nervous about crossing underneath the channel that separates the island and the mainland. I could feel a powerful rushing of water muffled by rock, and heard the sound of a current running. By that time I was up to my knee in mud and didn't want to get stuck. Using a powerful flashlight, I was barely able to see around a bend that the water seemed to start to travel downhill. And I presume from the draft there is in fact a larger chamber, but exploration could prove deadly, and I already risked becoming stuck, and didn't want to get whisked away by some unseen current and driven into unknown abysses. Here's a webpage about the Satanic Cave. They largely explore the dry limestone sections. I'm not sure if they've made it into the clay tunnels, which are dangerous and are connected to the main cave by only one tunnel.
The tape. During the summer of 1983, in a quiet town near Minneapolis, Minnesota, the charred body of a woman was found inside the kitchen stove of a small farmhouse. A video camera was also found in the kitchen, standing on a tripod and pointing at the oven. No tape was found inside the camera at the time, although the scene was originally labeled as a homicide by police. An unmarked VHS tape was later discovered at the bottom of the farm's well, which had apparently dried up earlier that year. Despite its worn condition and the fact that it contained no audio, police were still able to view the contents of the tape. It depicted a woman recording herself in front of a video camera, seemingly using the same camera the police found in the kitchen. After positioning the camera to include both her and her kitchen stove in the image, the tape then showed her turning on the oven, opening the door, crawling inside, and then closing the door behind her. 8 minutes into the video, the oven could be seen shaking violently, after which point thick black smoke could be seen emanating from it. For the remaining 45 minutes of video, until the batteries in the camera died, it remained in its stationary position. To avoid disturbing the local community, police never released any information about the tape, or even the fact that it was found. Police were also not able to determine who put the tape in the well, or why the height and stature of the woman in the video didn't come close to matching the body they'd found in the oven.
For more tales from Minnesota, check out the videos Ranger John of the Lost River Forest in Minnesota and Belle Plaine. Stories from a small town on this channel.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.